Good morning, good afternoon or good evening everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and to another instalment in the dining room central railroad build. This video is quite a bit longer than my normal productions. Originally it was going to be 2 or 3 more parts, but I just wanted to put it all in together. I'm getting quite a backlog of stuff that I want to cover, so I figured it'd make more sense that way. And not only that, but I didn't really know where to break it, so I just lumped it all together. I know some of my viewers like the longer videos, so I guess this is your week. Anyway, without further ado, let's just head out into the workshop and get busy. Well, I've cut up the piece of plywood that I was using as a workbench. I have this piece of grade at the top of the helix and 3 pieces over this side, 2 sections of staging yard and 1 of the town in front, and that used up the workbench piece with virtually nothing left over. Tomorrow I'm going to cut some more tops. I'll probably do the 2 big ones on the peninsula, but before I do that I want to clean off this track around here and just put a long passenger car on it, just to make sure that I don't have any clearance problems. I don't think there should be, but I want to make sure before I cover it, because it'll be a lot easier to sort it out now than it will once the top's on. Well, I've tested the top lamp of the helix with a full-length passenger car, even though you can't actually run full-length cars, or it's not designed to run full-length cars on the 2-foot radius curves, and it misses by the proverbial mile, so there is more than enough clearance for anything you might want to run. Next thing to do is to start installing tops, and with that in mind I have started by cutting a 16-inch radius curve on the corner of the sheet of plywood. I can just get that on top of this corner of the peninsula, get that screwed in place, and then continue from there. So don't go away, I'll check in with you again later. Well, I have the first large piece of plywood top installed, along with this ramp up from the helix. I may have mentioned earlier that there was no appreciable framing in here because of the clearance needed, so this end was a bit bouncy. Well, I've put these 3 little brackets in. They won't be visible from normal viewing angles, and that makes it as solid as can be. I think the next piece I'm going to do is the rest of the peninsula, this other large bit. Get that in, and that will ensure that everything is braced properly in the horizontal plane. So let me get back to work and I'll check in with you again later. Don't go away. Well, I've got this side of the railroad entirely sheeted. I'm not quite sure what time it is, but my stomach is telling me it's time for lunch. I forgot to bring my watch out this morning, so I'm just going to go in, get some food, and I will continue this afternoon. Well, most of the tops are now installed. Done this long skinny bit down here. I'm still missing the top of the grade and the horseshoe at the end. And there's a couple of pieces here that are not yet screwed down because I've still got to get the grade right. Everything for the staging yard, all those 4 pieces along the back are installed, as are these 2 pieces in the front and the bit in the corner. This still flaps because I've got to get the grade right there, and here you see the dropped area for the coal trestle. It will be 5/8 of an inch higher than that because of the blue foam that goes on top of the sub-road bed here. Well, if you recall, on Friday I had most of the top deck sheeted. My task for this afternoon is to get this end piece worked out. I've just put my last full sheet of 1/2-inch plywood on the workbench, and the first thing I'm going to do is cut the semicircle that goes around the front. Work out where that goes, make sure it is exactly above the bottom deck, and then I can work my way back from there. The difficult part is going to be getting the sub roadbed for the grade correct. Once that's done, the bit at the back will be fairly simple. Well, this rather odd shaped piece is the key to getting everything accurate, and of course making sure it's in the right place with 2 levels, both plumbed properly, one at the end of the aisle and one at the side. It's not permanently installed yet. At the moment it's just wedged in place. It's quite a tight fit. So now I can get rid of the levels and make sure everything else works, and then I can get that glued in place. So don't go away, I'll be right back. Well, that end piece is permanently installed, and I have a piece of sub road bed just temporarily positioned in approximately the right place above it. This piece needs to go in next, and I have that gluing up over the other side. You can see it there. There's another stiffener on the bottom as well. By the time those clamps are ready to come off, it's going to be almost time to go in. So that is about as far as I can do on this project for the day. However, I can change tack and work on fascia. I think I will work on this complex bit down here, get the most difficult bit in first, and then it'll be simpler after that. Well, there is that very awkward piece of fascia installed. As you can see, I needed a lot of clamps. It is just trying to spring off, so I need to let that glue set overnight. And also, while I was cranking on that, this piece fell out and I had to re-glue that as well. It's a lot better installed this time round, so I guess it was a good thing that it fell out the first time. Anyway, all I can sensibly do now is go inside and let that glue set up. So don't go away, I will check in with you again tomorrow. Well, the first thing I did this morning was to recycle all the clamps. Here they are. I've also installed this piece. I still need to get the front corner properly supported. At the moment it wants to sag about 1/4 of an inch. That's why the clamp's there. This end, it just sits perfectly level where it's supposed to be. Next thing I need to do is to get the semicircle of sub road bed in, and then I can work on from there. Well, I decided I needed a bit of help in this area. Because of the grades, I need to cut between these 2 tracks, which are close together. So I need to make sure that I can position them accurately. The grade up from the helix continues all the way through this area, because it's the only way I can get enough height. And then on the back track, through the middle of the viewfinder now, the low point obviously is about here, and then that starts going back up again, because it has to be at full height by the time it gets round here to where the levels are. Anyway, with that printed out, I can now continue with the assurance that I'm going to be able to get it right. So let me go back to work, and I'll check in with you again later. Well, I have been fighting with this area pretty much all afternoon, and it is now done. There's all these opposing grades coming together. The foam stops here. Well, there's one more bit to go on there, and then these grades don't get any foam because that's the right height. There wasn't enough space in there to waste that 5/8 of an inch. This piece still needs a stiffener along the front, and that is currently gluing up over the other side of the workshop. So I'm going to leave that until tomorrow, and I will continue then. Well, here is the special piece that's been gluing up overnight. I've trimmed the ends off and neatened up the sides on the table saw, and that is going to get glued underneath the shelf. The fascia over this area is going to be sloping down at a 2% angle, otherwise there'll be nothing this end. Well, with this stiffener now installed, this area is done as far as the plywood is concerned. The next thing to do is to get the tops cleaned off, get all the tools out of the way, sweep off all the sawdust, and then get the blue foam out. Actually, come to think of it, there is one more thing to do before I get the sawdust swept off. I still have to cut a little bit out of here, that trench where I've marked it, because there is less than the regulation clearance under here. It should be sufficient for his steam error trains, but just in case he wants to run anything a little bit taller, I'm going to cut that out and then just have the blue foam bridge the gap. That way I will keep the 3.5 inch clearance. So let me get the jigsaw out quickly, cut that, and then I'll be back to the original plan. Well, forget what I said about the blue foam in my last recording. While I was cutting this slot, I realized there's other things I need to do as well. I've added a 1/2 inch plywood edge to the staging yard, which I had forgotten I needed, and now I need a vertical piece of thin plywood. I've got some 3/16, and that will need to come 3.5 inches above the plywood deck for the staging yard to be the front edge of the town, because there is a raised city area above the staging yard. And then one more non-trivial thing is the swing gate. I've still got to build the upper deck on that, so I've probably got the rest of the day before I'm ready to cut blue tops. So let me get back to work and I'll check in with you again later. Don't go away. Well, here is the bit that goes above the staging yard to support the city. It's in 3 pieces. One this side of the road bridge, and then 2 this side with a joint here. That makes it easy to take it off as necessary. I have not glued any of it because he might want to dismantle the whole thing to lay the track in the staging yard area. So everything is just screwed. And of course those top panels are just rest in place. They're not attached at all. However, the road bridge will be permanently installed. And more than likely, only the middle section will ever need to come off. The 2 bits at the end, where the level is behind that wall, and this end, where that straight edge is, that's where all the turnouts go, and those bits will always be left open. So access should not be a major issue in there. Well, apart from the swing gate, all the blue foam tops are now cut. I haven't glued any of it in place yet. I'm going to leave that till Friday afternoon, where I can have it left the whole weekend without disturbing it. Also 2 pieces on the bottom that weren't done the first time round. This corner and a tapered piece at the end of that seam. I still have a little time left this afternoon, so I think I will attach some more fascia, use up all my clamps, so that's not holding me up when I get to doing the fascia. So let me continue and I'll be right back. Don't go away. Well, that is a worthwhile bit of fascia done. It's about 20 something feet, just over 20 feet, all the way along the outside of the top deck, and that's about all the clamps I have. So I'm going to call that a day, and I will check in with you again tomorrow. So don't go away. One of the things I've done this morning is put in these 2 little bits of missing backdrop. There's a piece in here. I don't know how long it is, I didn't measure it. I just used a thin strip to get the length. And it's just wedged in there tightly between the other 2 pieces. And there's another piece the same on the other side, although it's a little bit shorter. Another thing I've done this morning is finished all the fascia on this side of the railroad, all 3 levels. So that's something else that I can chop off my list. And here's the other piece of backdrop that I inserted. Same method as the other side, it's just a tight fit pushed in between the existing pieces. The next task for this morning is to come over here and work on the swing gate. I need to get the top level framed and then the hinges installed so I can get the gate permanently attached and adjusted, and then cut the blue foam for the top. So let me work on that and I will be right back. My method of spacing out the scenic decks on the swing gate is to use threaded rods, because they'll be a lot less obtrusive than wood supports. And I figure we'll just plant some tall conifers in the vicinity, paint them black, and they'll pretty much disappear. I got them mounted at the bottom, although they're all too long. This one I've already cut off, and the method of doing that is to clamp it so that it doesn't wobble, and then just put a metal cut-off disc in my skill saw. It took a few seconds. In fact, it took longer to install the cut-off disc than it did to cut that first rod. So 1 down, 3 to go. I'll check in with you again later. Well, that is the swing gate installed as planned. Unfortunately, I don't like the plan. Originally, I thought that the threaded rods would have a lot more stiffness than they do. The trouble is they're so flexible that this hinge at the top really does nothing. So all the stiffness is in the bottom 14 inches or so of the 2 lower decks. Now, although it works fine, it swings open and closed without dropping, but I think it might drop over time. So what I want to do is take that bottom hinge and move it all the way to floor level with a triangular gusset here and a brace back to the wall stud at the bottom. The other problem I ran into, totally unforeseen, was that there is a screw right behind here, so I can't get the last screw in that bottom hinge. So let me go away and make those modifications, and I'll be right back. Don't go away. I removed the swing gate once more because it's a lot easier to work on this bottom section with the gate on top of the workbench instead of installed at floor level. Anyway, that is braced in all directions. There's this wide gusset plate behind it to keep it in the same plane as the fascia, and this diagonal brace supports the weight of the outer end. If we move over to the other portion of the railroad, this L bracket down here braces the bottom of this leg against the first 2 wall studs and therefore holds it firmly in all directions. So now it's just a case of putting the gate back in place and moving that bottom hinge right to the bottom of the leg. So let me do that and I'll be right back. Well, it's only a minor modification, but getting those hinges further apart at the bottom makes a huge difference to the strength and the stiffness of the bridge. It now swings open and it doesn't even grind on the bottom bit. This ledger board that I've been using to put it in place when I need to work on it, it's not even needed for support anymore. It's a little tight. I've got to adjust the benchwork footprint. I've got to undo those screws and move it maybe a 32nd of an inch towards the post. That's not surprising because it's been so wet the last few days. The air is super saturated, so the wood is probably expanded. Anyway, next thing to do is get the top on, get a piece of plywood cut for that, get it attached, and then cut some blue foam to go on top of that. And then I'll be happy with the day's progress. So let me get back to work and I'll check in with you again later. Well, the swing gate is now done. I haven't attached the blue tops yet, but then I haven't done that anywhere on the top level. The other thing I haven't done is install the bolt to hold it closed. That needs to be done after the fascia because obviously it goes on top of the fascia. But if we look at the bottom, with the bottom fully closed, the top wants to stay out about 1/4 of an inch. the threaded rods are flexible enough that you can just push that in and the bolt will go just inside on the upper level benchwork, and if the bolt is closed, you know the bottom is also in the right place. That way it only needs one bolt. Well, I didn't make any recordings Friday afternoon. I just came out here for a couple of hours and I got all the blue foam glued down everywhere on the top level and the two missing pieces on the lower level. I put screws in all the way around the outside about every 10 inches or so just to make sure it didn't peel up, and a few in the middle. I used bricks where I had them, but once I ran out of weights I used screws. Anyway, it's now Monday afternoon, just got back from doing my errands, and next thing I do is take all the screws out, get rid of the weights, and then I'm going to get on with cutting backdrops and fascia. So let me get organised and I'll be right back. Well, I cut all the backdrops for the rest of the railroad. Here they are stacked up here. I'm not going to be building those backdrops. I'm just going to be supplying the raw materials for the client because he does not have a table saw available at the moment. There's 4 different widths there. Some of them will need to be trimmed to length, but everything is the width it needs to be. I have also got along quite well with fascia. I've got the 2 pieces on the inside of the swing gate and 4 pieces down the other end of the aisle. And that's all the clamps I have. It's also all the time I have this afternoon. So I'm going to go in now and I will check in with you again tomorrow. Don't go away. Well, it's Tuesday morning and my main task for today is to finish the fascia. I have quite a lot inside the aisle to do. And I still have the front of the swing gate and this end of all 3 levels. I also want to get the ledger boards built today and get the backdrop painted in the area that I'm going to be doing the scenery. As you can see, I have already spackled the joints. I did that first before I even recycled the clamps from yesterday. That way it has a chance of being ready to sand so I can get it painted today as well. Otherwise I'll be painting tomorrow instead. Well, that is most of the fascia installed. I finished this side of the aisle and I did the far end of the other side, and I've just put one more piece on the swing gate, and now I've run out of clamps, so I'm going to get on with something else quickly. So don't go away, I'll check in with you again later. Well, I've now left all the glue to dry for a couple of hours. I've had lunch. I've got the first coat of blue paint on the backdrop. I've also made all the ledger boards to support the railroad in the customer's room. Next thing I'm going to do is recycle all these clamps, and then I can finish the fascia. So let me get back to work and I'll check in with you again later. Don't go away. Well, I've done a little more work on the fascia. I also started work on a control panel for the engine terminal. It's not quite in line with the turntable, which is the ideal location for it, but it's where there is sufficient depth here in front of the helix for the turntable controller. Well, I have done several more pieces of fascia. Here is the blank for the engine terminal control panel. That has a frame inside it that is screwed in the 4 corners that allows it to be detachable to work on the back of it. This area, the front of the helix, is going to be open, making it a lot easier to view trains in the helix. I've still got to put another piece on here, and I have 2 pieces missing on the outside. That piece that you see now with the single clamp on does not get glued. That can't be glued in place until the railroad is installed in the client's room. As you can see, it spans 2 levels that need to be detachable. I can't do any more at the moment because I need to be able to shut the swing gate, and as you can see I have clamps in the way. Of course, ironically, I have not run out of clamps. I still have about 5 of the really good ones left, and if it wasn't for those 2 clamps stopping the swing gate shutting, I could probably get everything finished tonight. Well, that is all I can do inside the aisle for now. I had to take the engine terminal control panel out and glue and clamp that edge because it was sprung apart. And until I can get that reinstalled, I can't measure to get this skinny piece of fascia along the front there. But this is all in, and the only other fascia I still have to do are these two pieces at the bottom of the outside of the end. So let me get on with those and I'll be right back. Well, I didn't come out again yesterday. The weather was so nasty I just stayed inside all day. Had plenty of work to get on with. But this morning I have reinstalled the engine terminal control panel. I've put in the small piece of fascia that goes next to it, so that inside area is done. In here, most of the missing bits can't actually be glued in place until it's installed in the client's train room, because we don't know how big the gap is going to be between the benchwork and the wall. So I've cut pieces that go in here, fill in the ends, they're oversized, another one for the bottom, and this tapered piece, because really the landscape needs to be fairly high in this corner, but installing it full height now, not only is it going to make this section significantly more difficult to pack, but also more likely it's going to get broken off in transit. So that's why this piece will be glued on after he's installed it. I already talked about this piece. Obviously it spans two section joints, so it can't be glued on until it's installed. The other thing I have done this morning is installed the locking bolt for the swing gate. Well, that's all for this week, and originally it was going to be all for this series, because that completes all the work I was initially contracted for. But as I hinted at in a couple of places towards the end of that video, the project grew and I ended up getting more work to do. So I'll see you back here next week, same time, same place, and in the meantime, thanks for watching and bye for now.